So let's talk about the privilege manager for Unix as a replacement for the privilege manager for sudo or for sudo control. As we have seen, the privilege access suite for Unix contains either the privilege manager for sudo or the privilege manager for Unix product, and both can be used to implement least privilege management on Unix. Of course, the privilege manager for Unix offers a little bit more features that can be taken into consideration in setting up your security policy. So we have seen the sudo management before, so let's have a look on the Unix management via privilege manager. When we go back to our management console for Unix, you're going to see that in addition to my primary server for sudo, I have a primary server for PM policy as well. And not surprisingly, the primary server holds or is responsible for a policy that is called PM. And in contrast to a plugin used in sudo, Privilege Manager for Unix uses an agent. So this needs to be installed as well. That can be done either via the command line or via the management console for Unix. Okay, so you see I have a server PM policy for PM. This is my policy server, and I have a client joined to it. It is here, it is PM for PM. That is the thing that is controlled via my policy server. So if we just go for the policy, and this is pretty much the same approach, we can select PM policy editor, and you see that the sudo policy editor is sitting in the tab next to it, but we now want to go to the PM policy. So we just open our current version of the PM policy. But you may already see that in contrast to the sudo editor, this is a more sophisticated editor that is able to display it in a different form, because the structure of the internal policy is pretty much different to the one that is used in sudo. So first of all, it is consisting of a couple of roles, so you can define your own roles, and all your roles will define which and what commands which users can define where, at which time, on what host, in which directory, and so on and so on. So I have just created a new one that is called secure. And if I just edit this, just double click on it, it will load the appropriate definition for that role. And of course, these roles can assign to users that can log in. So you can set up a very fine-grained security policy. Okay, so this is just the entry page of it, and this is some kind of little wizard that is now being executed that you can follow to form your first policy for the privilege manager for Unix. So just give it a name, enable the keystroke logging. This is pretty important if you want to see the in and output of it, pretty much as the same for sudo. You can enable password logging if you want. You can go for the authentication. You can have user-defined variables, and of course the good thing here is, the most important thing is here on commands. I have now defined that you can run commands in /bin or user bin, and the only one you can execute is cat/var/log secure, pretty much the same example as I have used with sudo. And the other one is on which host this command can be executed. You can have this kind controlled for remote connection to other hosts as well, and so on and so on, and about what users are allowed to do it, what groups, AD groups, and maybe time restrictions you want to apply as well. So this is very much flexible in terms of what you can achieve here. On the other hand, this only gives you a basic structure of the policy that is capable to be defined in the privilege manager for Unix, because in contrast to the sudo file, it uses more or less a configuration file that can embed something like a logic, because it uses a programming style language to define your security policy. And with that programming language that sits behind that policy, it can be pretty much flexible and can react on circumstances or different environments, and so on and so on. So this is much more powerful and much more flexible than sudo can do. Okay, so let's go back to here. So just give it a cancel, and now I have this here in my role, and I have already saved it, and it is already active on my policy server. So now the only thing I have to go to log into my client and see how this behaves in contrast to sudo. So let me go back to my client down below. Here it is. So just clear my screen. So who am I? Who am I? I'm bootcamp 1, and the host name I'm sitting on is the PM4PM, my privilege manager for Unix client. Okay, so let's start. So the first thing I just want to do, the same as with the sudo one, I want to have this cat var log secure. And this is the secured log file I'm not able to access by default. And of course, I'm still not able to exit it, but I can use the same or pretty much the same approach like sudo. But in contrast to sudo, I have to use a different command. It is called pmrun. So this is in opt quest bin pmrun and cat var log secure. So pretty much the same, but just replace sudo with pmrun. And typo as usual. Cat, I was missing space, and you see that the message of the privilege manager was coming back showing me, yeah, that's nothing I can handle or just being forbidden. And if I just do it right, I get access to the same information as with sudo. So let's switch back to our console, because as I have said in the sudo demonstration, it uses this pretty much the same interface, and it is able to do some kind of event logs and replay logs. So you can have events, and now you can switch for the different policy, because you can have the policy here, and you can have the limits as well as we have done before. So find, let's see what it comes back with. And you see that I've just played around a little bit on this, and now this is our latest execution of the command as before. And if I double click on it, it loads pretty much the same stuff to the interface as with the sudo command, and I can replay it here, and I'm going to see the content that is listed out, and as well I can see the command I've executed and the log host and the run host where it goes through, and so on and so on. And here's the path of the internal database where all this is stored. Of course, that is the same as for sudo, because it uses the same interface, it's the same database, but it uses just different mechanisms to control the execution. And of course, everything that I have shown here with the management console for Unix can be done via command lines on the appropriate policy servers as well. So you can browse through the entries, watch what's coming back, what was executed, take a look into the database, and so on and so on. Everything is available via command line or via this nice little management console for Unix. Just one more word to the management console for Unix. The management console for Unix is currently in sustained mode, so that may mean that it is not currently actively developed longer, or it may be even deprecated in the next future. But let's see what the future brings. You can still use it, it's very nice and easy, and on the other hand you still have the command line or maybe a different tool. I don't know at the current moment, but whatever it is. Okay, see you then.